Yeah, we'll bring up the slides in a moment. Just to welcome everybody, I'm Joshua Breitbart, Senior Vice President for ConnectALL, leading the state's broadband office. Thank you so much for joining us for our first ISP, virtual ISP forum. As you see, we've got many people participating, and we're trying to do this in meeting mode because we want to create opportunities for discussion and Q&A. The session will be recorded, just so everybody is aware of that. We will make it available. Our plan is to make it available for anybody who wasn't able to make it. We will be hearing from our federal partners today. That will be Jody Vanell, our federal program officer from NTIA, as well as Wendy Lader, who's the Northeast Regional Director from NTIA, and Anna Reed, who's our federal program officer from the Treasury Department Capital Projects Fund. We will, in each section, have some time for Q&A. If you have questions that are specific to that particular presentation or program or the funding requirements that are outlined in that section. And then we'll have more time for discussion and Q&A at the end. Again, there'll be plenty of time, but we'll try and just move it along. Because we're such a big group, please use the raise hand function or the chat to share questions. Anything we're not able to get to today, either because of time, because the answer isn't immediately available, or in some cases, answers are still forthcoming as they're developed by our federal partners. We will follow up with you to have that information. And at the end, we'll also talk through some of our additional forums that'll be upcoming and opportunities for participation. Let's move on to, let's see the opening slide. There we go, great. Next slide. This is our agenda for the day. So we'll go through our different funding programs, but first we'll begin with an overview of ConnectALL. And then, as I said, we'll talk about further opportunities for engagement in our process and shaping our programs, and have some opportunity for further Q&A and discussion at the end, before closing out with some next steps. Next slide, please. Let's go into an overview of ConnectALL. Some of you may have seen this already, but just want to make sure that we're, level setting here. ConnectALL is the governor's overarching mission to transform New York's digital infrastructure, make sure that broadband is available to all residents and businesses in the state. We have 5 signature grant programs under ConnectALL: a municipal infrastructure and assistance program, affordable housing connectivity program, rural broadband program, connectivity innovation, and digital equity. Next slide. As we've been doing sessions in every region of the state, we've been sharing a set of principles that guide ConnectALL through all of the work that we're doing, and give you a sense of the frame that we bring, the lens we bring to the federal and state requirements that structure our programs. So first principle is equity, ensuring that everyone has the service, the skills, the equipment, and the context that they need to fully participate in our society, democracy, and economy through the internet. Performance is that all New York residents should have access to high quality connections, fast speeds, reliable service. Broadband should be excellent throughout New York. Consumer choice is a key principle, that New York residents not only can choose from multiple broadband options, but also have the types of products and services that meet their needs and their modes of engagement. Affordability, cost should not be a barrier for any New York resident. It's a key principle. And then lastly, safety. And this one certainly resonates as we do these listening sessions, that all New York residents and proprietors should be able to use the internet with certainty of their privacy, security, and digital well-being. Next slide, please. So as I said, there are 5 signature grant programs that altogether total over $1 billion of public investment that the governor, with the support of the state legislature, has directed ConnectALL to implement. That over $1 billion program comes from these 3 main sources. So one is the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which includes the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, or BEAD, where so far we have been awarded a planning grant, which this conversation is part of. And soon, in fact, very soon, we will have an understanding or knowledge of what our allocation is for the state of that for investment in broadband deployment. IIJA also includes a state digital equity program, which also we have a planning grant that has been guiding our engagement around the state. After we develop that plan and with the approval of NTIA, we'll have an award to the state that we will use for a capacity building grant program driven by that digital equity plan. And that planning grant so far is $2 million we've been awarded to date. The American Rescue Plan Act included the Coronavirus Capital Projects Fund, CPF, from the Treasury Department. New York's allocation of that is $345 million, of which $100 million has been awarded for our affordable housing connectivity program. And then lastly, but certainly not least, the state legislature contributed an allocation of $300 million to the ConnectALL initiative. So at the bottom, you can see the approximate total of that amount and how much of that has been awarded to date. Next slide, please. So the key to understanding those sources is that each one comes with its own timeline and requirements that we'll hear more about. The digital equity program, you can see the timeline playing out for when we expect to complete that plan. The plan will be available for comment in the fall. When we'll get the capacity grant awarded, and ultimately when we expect to complete that. The BEAD program, again, timeline. We are preparing our 5-year action plan, followed by an initial proposal, which then we will use to run the grant program throughout 2024. Based on the results of that, we will get our final award from NTIA and begin making those grant awards primarily in 2025. And then lastly, the Capital Projects Fund is a faster timeline with an expiration of funds at the end of 2026. As I said, we still have some of the awards pending. So that gives you an understanding of the overall ConnectALL program and again, why it's so important to hear from our federal partners, from the Commerce Department, NTIA, which oversees the digital equity and BEAD programs, and from Treasury Department, which oversees the Capital Projects Fund. Next. And then lastly, just introducing this series. This is just the first conversation focused on the federal and state grant requirements, but we are going to be scheduling additional ones and be reaching out to you about those, covering topics including working with New York State, potentially opportunities for programs that could support your participation in these programs, building up our understanding of workforce development needs, and other opportunities, partnering with MWBEs and other needs for technical assistance, and then ultimately reviewing the state's digital equity plan in the fall. So now, next slide. I'm going to hand it over to Jodia Vanel, our Federal Program Officer from NTIA, who has been our great partner in all this work across the state to provide an overview of the BEAD program. Jodia?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Josh, for transitioning it over to me. I am in a co-working space, so I'm just trying to navigate to get back to my notes. But good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us on a riveting Tuesday to talk about BEAD and the program and all of the amazing funds that will be coming to New York to expand affordable and accessible broadband. Just to reiterate some points or make some points, this is just a really safe space for us to foster continuous dialogue. So really appreciate everyone being here. This presentation is really to level set for everyone our perspective from NTIA. I know that many of you all probably know this even better than me. And then there's some newer folks on this call that is just good to just go over the full presentation. Joining me today is Wendy Lader, who is our amazing regional director covering 10 states. You will hear from her. She'll weave throughout this conversation, and I will just do a formal introduction as we continue through the slides. So again, Jodia Vanel, Federal Program Officer dedicated to the great state of New York. I work collaboratively with the ConnectALL organization, most importantly, to get you all funding to make sure that affordable and accessible broadband is expanded in New York. There's lots for us to do, so I really thank everyone for being here and being a true partner. Josh has mentioned all of the good work that we have to do together, and we can only do this with your participation in helping us get to the 5-year action plan and then the initial proposal, which we need so much insights from everyone, and we need full collaboration in order to get that in tip-top shape and ultimately submitted to our Assistant Secretary Davidson. Wendy, if you don't mind doing a quick introduction so everyone knows who you are before we get into the slide.
No, absolutely. Wendy Lader. I've met a number of you on this call. As Jodia mentioned, I'm the regional director for the Northeast, so I work with 10 states, Maine down to Delaware, and have been fortunate to get to know the New York folks prior to Jodia's arrival as our federal program officer, and also as a native New Yorker living in Brooklyn.
Thank you, Wendy. All right, if we can skip to the next slide. Okay, so we'll just be providing a full overview of the BEAD program. Josh and Wendy, feel free to chime in or reinforce any points here. And for the ISP community, gear up all of your questions. We'll definitely try to answer as much as we can if we don't have an answer, because as we said, this is still developing. We are flying the plane and developing it and building it out at the same time, but we'll definitely share that insight. This is the first of many conversations. So I want to just level set here, right? So that you fully understand the program and where we are. We get information all the time or questions about where are we? Did we miss our timeline to get engaged? No, you are absolutely on time. So as you can see, the BEAD Broadband Equity Access Deployment Program is a $42.5 billion or $42.45 billion plus a little bit more for infrastructure planning. This is a pool that is allocated to all of the 50 states plus its territories. And it's specifically focused on planning for deployment of internet, deploying or upgrading internet, installing internet in multiple tenant buildings, implementing adoption and digital equity programs, and focusing on workforce and job training. So I wanted to make sure that we fully understand why we are here today and having a seat at the table. If you look down at the timeline, just want to point to you, we are literally just gearing up for the 5-year plan. And at the end of the year, we are to submit our initial proposal. So of course, what did that mean? The governors of all the states raised their hands and said, yes, we want to be part of this. They sent their letter of intent. We moved forward. We created a ton of reports that were needed. And now we're at the 5-year action plan, which kind of tells what we're going to do in the next 5 years. And then ultimately, what are the steps to achieve all of that and making sure that we're hitting all of the criteria. So if you all have not taken a look at the NOFO, that's the Notice of Funding Opportunity document, please take a look at this. This presentation is literally pulling things from there, but that is really like our Bible that we go to each and every single time to look at what the structure is of this program, and answers all of the questions and provides the answers to what we currently have. With that, Wendy, anything to say on this slide that we may have missed or want to hone in on?
Sounds good. Think you can keep moving.
All righty, next slide, please. Okay, eligible entity. So for everyone, eligible entity, AKA, is New York State. That is who NTIA is transacting with. That's who we are helping to make sure that the state is successful. So the ConnectALL office under Empire State Development is administering all of this on behalf of the state, and we are the federal partners to ensure success. And most importantly, funds are brought into New York. All of you all on the line hopefully will become the sub-grantees. I'll let Josh talk a little bit more about that later on, but ultimately, Josh is my stakeholder. You are the sub-grantees, which is all of our stakeholders at the end of the day. But we need to, again, get to our initial proposal so that we can even get to that point of having sub-grantees. So we need everyone's help in order to make us successful, to get our initial proposal checked off the list as satisfactory and approved. And I just want to say you all will play such an important role, and you know the role that you all will play at the end of the day, but we can't do this without the ISP community. So just want to drill that along with all of these other folks that are listed. So not only is it the ISP community, they're not-for-profits, public-private partnerships, utilities, tribal nations, local folks. There's so many folks that come together in order to be considered as the sub-grantees. Next slide. Here, some of you already know, but this is really how we're going to prioritize what goes on in the state of New York. Yes, we'd love to have internet connectivity for every single person, but can we do that? Not yet. So in BEAD, we're going to really prioritize those that are unserved in New York. And so you can see here how we prioritize that. The entity, New York State eligible entity, is going to serve or must serve all the unserved locations. And here you'll see what those speed limits are that we're going after, anything underneath this. Then we're going to look at the unserved locations that have maybe slightly a little bit higher, but still relatively low. And then we want to make sure that we are including all of our anchored institutions because they play such a great role in making sure that everyone is truly connected in the state. Move on to the next slide. So I want to just bring you all, the ISP community, into what NTIA and BEAD focuses on. This is really important because when we're saying that we're going to develop this sort of partnership, these are some of the expectations in working with the ISP community along with others. You know, we want to make sure that BEAD is promoting and everyone is adhering to the fair labor practices, workforce development, climate resiliency. We have Wendy here, which is actually a gem to us because she's one of the ones leading up the task force on workforce development. There's some ISPs that I've even spoken to and other stakeholders in New York where we're really going to lean on you to help us develop that out in the state of New York along with Empire State Development. That is very important to us because not only this is a one-time project, we want to make sure that it's sustainable. We want to make sure that we're creating the new generation of folks that will be working in this industry. We're identifying the needs and we want to make sure that they're addressed. So again, fair labor practices, workforce development, climate resiliency is very important to this puzzle. Wendy, anything else that you think should be highlighted that are some of the key pillars coming out of NTIA?
So for fair labor practices, there are some key requirements in the NOFO. So I really recommend that people take a look at that to see what is required. Subgrantees must show that they're complying with federal labor and employment laws. They also have to make demonstrations that they have a skilled workforce and equitable on-ramps. So I really, I don't want to go into detail right now, but I really recommend that people take a look and see what is required by the NOFO in all three of these areas, which are quite detailed.
Absolutely. Next slide, please. Okay, we're getting into, I would say, one of Josh's favorite topics. When's the money coming? How is it going to be derived? How much are we ultimately going to get? And so we don't know exactly the date that the funds will be announced, but we know by June 30th that these funds will be announced in all across the country, particularly in New York State. So look forward to sharing that information with you and creating more widespread awareness around this. But here are some of the funding, its initial basis of how we get to this point. Obviously, we are taking into consideration the FCC broadband data maps, taking that into consideration of how much will come to the state of New York in all territories, in all states and in the territories, as you can see the breakdown here, $100 million at least, and 25 for the territories. But since we're focusing on New York, we'll be looking at least $100 million or more to come to this particular state. And again, the focus is on the unserved locations, high cost locations. That's really the primary basis of thinking about how much funding will actually be allocated to New York. There are more factors that go into this, but again, the focus for BEAD is to tap into and build that gap for the unserved locations. Next slide, please. All right, I think this is one of our money slides right now to pay close attention to. So I'll let you all just digest it a little bit because you get to really see where we are, where we're gearing up to go, and some of the nuances in achieving an official check off from NTIA of this being approved. So we haven't started, or we kind of have started the initial proposal process. First, we have to get through the 5-year action plan. But ultimately, everything that we've been doing, all of the work that the ConnectALL office has been doing with engagement, this is all going into the initial proposal. So as you can see here, it has to be completed through the NOFO. You'll see all of the requirements. Those are the engagements, the local coordination, the data that we're building all across the various regions. We've seen you all across 10 of them now. You're helping to build all of the critical information that's in here. In the fall, Josh and the team will be submitting ultimately by the end of the year this initial proposal to us. It will be reviewed by myself, by Wendy, and by the assistant secretary. And of course, there's so many criteria that we have to hit. That's why we're constantly engaging over and over and over and over again. I want to ask, I don't want to open up the questions right now, but I know that you may come back to this particular slide. So just hold off on your questions for right now. But I just wanted to make sure that you fully understood where we are in the process and where we're ultimately going to get and where you will come in is where when we get to the point of a subgrantee selection. But we're nowhere close to that because we have to fill out the initial proposal and get New York to be completely approved by NTIA in order to release the funds, and then the subgrantee selection starts after that process. Wendy, Josh, anything you want to add here?
So I do want to emphasize the challenge process because I think that's key for the people on this call to know about, which is after volume 1 has been approved of the initial proposal and volume 2 has been submitted to NTIA. The ConnectALL office can go ahead and develop or run a process by which different stakeholders can challenge whether a particular location is eligible for grant funds. So it can't challenge the existence of a location, right? All the broadband serviceable locations are actually set by the FCC map, so you can't add locations, but you can challenge whether or not it's served or underserved or unserved. And the challenges can be made by you all on this call, ISPs, as well as nonprofits and local governments. That's set by statute. I don't know if you want to add anything else about that, Josh, but it's an important piece that I think the ISPs should be aware of early on.
Absolutely. There are a number of considerations that states have in deciding how to run the challenge process. NTIA has provided guidance. We are looking at things such as the use of speed tests potentially, or other criteria. It does not, as Wendy said, have to exactly match how the FCC has made the determinations. It just has to use those locations. So that's an area where your input is welcome as we're developing the state challenge process.
And Josh, I don't know if you want to talk about, like, because I know that it's still up for determination of how long that challenge process will be. But if you have any thoughts in mind, feel free to share that now. But I know that it's at least 30 days that that challenge process should be.
Yeah, and it's, as so there's that minimum, and then we'll factor in, how much time we think it'll take depending on some of the complexity. And how quickly we want to move ahead with grant awards. But that's always a balance for the challenge process is how complex it is and how granular we're able to get in the time allotted. The other thing just to note, I think, about the use of those initial 20% of the funds, I think my understanding is that, it's a fairly high bar in terms of projects that could qualify for that. So I think we have to temper our expectations for how much of that initial 20% allocation will be used until we have our full award and the final proposal has been submitted and approved.
Okay. Next slide. So again, as part of the initial proposal, New York State has to establish fair, open, and competitive processes for all of the subgrantees. This is everything about you all that are on the call right now. These are the principles in which Josh and the team will use as their selection process.
So these are some of the key criteria that NTIA has laid out. Some of the things within this are like the extremely high cost per location threshold is something that states ultimately need to determine as part of the proposal to NTIA.
I'm not sure if you can hear me, but I literally just cut out. Am I back?
You are. You're back.
Okay. I don't know if you can see a video. I cannot see
And just to explain the extremely high cost per location threshold. So if you have a subgrantee that has applied to serve a specific area that's been designated as a project that provides fiber, but it surpasses that extremely high cost per location threshold that's been set by the state, then the state or territory does not need to go with the fiber preference. That's what that's about. Otherwise, it should select the fiber project. More on that soon.
Okay, Wendy and Josh, I'm not sure if you can hear me. I cannot see you all, but I still see the slide up.
We hear you.
Okay, are we able to move to the next slide? And thank you for jumping in on that. I'm not really sure what's happening, but I am having connectivity issue.
Jody, we don't hear you now. Are you speaking to the slide? Or I can jump in that the BEAD program calls for matching funds of 25% or more of the project costs. And eligible entities are required to incentivize matches greater than 25%. They can do so at a greater percentage. The goal is really that there be a reduced amount of federal funds used for these purposes, if that's possible. And matches can be in kind or cash. And waivers can be made only in extraordinary circumstances. I think we can move on to the next slide. I'm not sure that Jody is on. So these are specific qualifications that are set out in the BEAD NOFO. Subgrantees have to meet general and specific qualification requirements that include financial capability, managerial capability, technical. They must show that they're complying with laws, health and safety laws. They must show that they have operational capabilities, provide ownership information, and disclose any applications for broadband service projects using public funds. There's a lot of information on each of these. Again, it's spelled out in the NOFO, so I won't take up time running through this.
Okay, Wendy, I think I'm back.
You're back now.
I think I'm sort of back. I cannot see you all, but I see a slide, so I'll continue. So thank you for taking over that piece. And again, just want to make sure everyone visits broadband.com, where you can get a little bit more insights about this information, but definitely NOFO is the place to review all of the requirements and criteria. So, and just continuing again, the obligations for the ISPs, as you can see, if you are to be a subgrantee, this is a must. You must meet these programmatic requirements. So again, ensuring that we're achieving these particular speeds, ensuring that we are meeting requirements, deployment deadlines, meeting established milestones from the ConnectALL office, and just being that conduit, right, to ensuring that we're achieving the speeds and interconnectivity that is needed. And then on the other side, making sure that as you're part of this process, offering to New York residents low-cost plans, consumer protection, ideas, access to service, public notice information, making sure that cybersecurity and other things are a part of the services that the ISP would provide to the folks, the residents who would be getting these amazing services. Next slide, please. And so here's the other thing. As being a sub-grantee, these are the things that we're asking for your commitment with the ConnectALL office and NTIA. And again, it's always servicing the folks that we're spending all of these billions of dollars to get to and make sure that they're connected. So providing low-cost options to these subscribers, making sure that the New York State has a defined parameter of low-cost plans, and having all of you all as ISPs participate in these plans, and making sure that the residents are appreciating it and having access to these plans so that they can reduce their costs. And here we're showing examples, and many of you all have seen this already or have been participating, but these are examples of how we can achieve more low-cost plans for the eligible subscribers in New York. And so next slide. Okay, so as you can see, we're spending a lot of time on the initial proposal because this is really the crux of everything that we're doing in order to get New York approved and achieve deployment and all of the other things that come with that. So just wanted to make sure that you all appreciate this because we're literally telling you how it should be done or suggesting how it should be done in order for us to feel that New York, the ConnectALL office and everyone involved is adhering to the NOFO and just making sure that there's an actual plan in place to achieve affordable and accessible broadband. So as it's saying here, when selecting among proposal, eligible entities must use an approved process with certain criteria. So of course, one, we want to make sure that this satisfies sub-grantee requirements and that they're priority broadband projects that have the full attention. And so priority broadband projects are projects that will rely entirely on fiber optic technology to reach the end users. So we can just go directly to the priority broadband projects and what are some non-priority broadband projects. So here, if there's one priority project, which again, this is something that we'll determine, and Josh can talk a little bit more as we figure out what the plan is going to be. So there may be one, there may be multiple, again, to be determined later on. But if there's more than one, it's very competitive and supporting benefits to the following factors: minimum speed, program outlay, affordability. Again, all of the things that we talked about, the fair labor practices, speed to deployment, workforce development, all of those things must be there in order for it to be completely competitive. We can move on to the next slide.
I do think it's worth noting that the NOFO prescribes 75%, but leaves an additional 25% to the state or territory in the sub-grantee selection process. So that will be something that will be defined by the ConnectALL office in its initial proposal.
And so after we finish the initial proposal and we get approval from the assistant secretary, we also, as I mentioned, coming up by the 30th, we'll also see the funds that will be allocated to New York. We have about a year or so after the initial proposal to submit the final proposal. We're a little ways from this, but wanted to show you the full process in order for us to tap into the full potential of New York. So I think we can hold off on questions about this part right now and come back at the end. And that's sort of it for BEAD. Again, there's so much more to it, and this is the first of many conversations. You can feel free to reach out to myself, Josh, Wendy, anyone at the ConnectALL office to gain more insights around this. NOFO is our document that we're looking at. There will be opportunities to challenge things a little bit more, but again, we'll share this information as they come. There will be more and more information released in the next coming months. And with that, I will open it up to any questions, or are we moving forward with our friends at the U.S. Treasury?
I think in the interest of time, I would encourage people who have questions to add them in the chat. Aaron, hopefully the subsequent slides answered your question about how subgrantees are selected. It'll be, as Jody described, a competitive grants program based on those criteria. And again, keep in mind, as Jody has said, there are some requirements, and then there are those areas where the ConnectALL office is making determinations regarding the challenge process, the additional 25% of the criteria, the extremely high cost threshold, things of that nature are helpful to hear your thoughts on. The project size, there's another area we're making determinations. So all those are areas to follow up on. If you don't have questions now, you want to discuss them later, as Jody said, follow up with any one of the three of us, our office, NTIA. We work very closely together. Happy to answer further questions. If you have questions you want to discuss later on, put them in the chat, but we'll move forward. And Jody, thank you. Wendy, thank you. With our partner from the Treasury Department, Capital Projects Fund, to discuss the requirements of that program. And I'll hand it over to Anna Reed, our Federal Program Officer from the Treasury Department. Thank you. Anna?
Thanks, Josh. I am Anna Reed. I'm a Senior Broadband Specialist with the Capital Projects Fund and the Office of Recovery Programs at the Department of the Treasury. So the Capital Projects Fund is a $10 billion fund that was created through the American Rescue Plan Act. It's formula funding to states that is used to support investment in capital projects. There are a couple key criteria for projects. So because this was, again, in the American Rescue Plan Act, it is funding in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. There are a couple key things, including the investments in capital assets need to be designed to directly enable work, education, and health monitoring. Programs need to be designed to address a critical need that resulted from or was made apparent or exacerbated by the COVID-19 public health emergency. And they need to be designed to address a critical need in the community that will be served by that project. So with the Capital Projects Fund, there are three eligible uses. They are broadband infrastructure, digital connectivity projects, and multi-purpose community facility projects. There really is a key priority on those investments in broadband infrastructure. Obviously, the pandemic did highlight the critical need for that infrastructure to connect communities and to enable work, education, and health monitoring, those key priorities of the program. So then moving on to some of the key considerations around the broadband infrastructure projects. They are it really is a program that is fiber focused. There's a need to meet or exceed 100 symmetrical speed requirement standard. If a program or proposed project within a program does not meet that standard, there must be a detailed explanation of why it is impracticable to do so. So that can be geography, topography, or the excessive cost of a project. And in addition to that, the funding is really focused on last mile projects, though there are some examples of middle mile or sort of other projects that are being funded, including, we'll get to New York's Affordable Housing Connectivity Program, which is last mile, but it's a very specific type of program. Subrecipients are required to participate in ACP, and there is a priority as well on having additional affordability requirements. Obviously, affordability is a fairly critical element of all of this, and ensuring that people are able to connect to the infrastructure that is funded through these programs. And then there needs to be a critical need, again, highlighting that this investment will meet a critical need in the community or communities that it is serving. And then again, emphasizing the importance of community engagement. So to date, moving to the next slide, 44 states have been approved to invest over $7 billion in CPF funding. So the process is a little bit different than the BEAD program. Again, this is formula funding. Two states submit program plans, which are reviewed by Treasury to ensure that they meet one of those three eligible uses: the broadband infrastructure, the digital connectivity projects, and the multi-purpose community facilities. And then that what is being proposed within that program aligns with those guidelines. Again, the broadband, the 100 symmetrical program standard, the participation in ACP, and there are similar requirements for the digital connectivity and multi-purpose community facility projects. So again, it's a $10 billion fund to date. 7 billion of that has been approved. With the broadband investments specifically, states are estimating that those will reach close to 2 million locations. So more to come, including in New York, where the state was allocated $345.5 million, and $100 million has been approved for the Affordable Housing Connectivity Program, which Josh mentioned at the beginning of the program, which is one of several state level programs. There are a handful of states that have a specific focus on affordable housing connectivity and have programs specifically designed to meet that need in terms of those underserved households. So that's just a very quick overview of the Capital Projects Fund and where we are with that program, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
So again, if there are questions, we can you can put them in the chat. Thank you, Anna. And again, this is a very strong, close collaboration and partnership between state and federal agencies. And I'll speak a bit to the state funding requirements. Can move to the next slide. So the state funding requirements are laid out in terms of what's in the legislature and the 2022 New York State Wired Act, which established the ConnectALL office, defined its key responsibilities to coordinate activities of all state agencies related to broadband, advise county and local governments and other state agencies on expanding broadband access.
Josh, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. The 2022 New York State Wired Act established ConnectALL and defined its key responsibilities, including to coordinate activities of all state agencies, advise county and local governments and other agencies, and manage all the federal funds coming in as well as the state funds through grant programs, some of which that are enumerated in the Wired Act, and then the authority to develop other programs and actions as needed to achieve the goals of the Wired Act. Next slide. So some things to keep in mind from the Wired Act, it does layer on other considerations, but is meant to work in harmony with the federal requirements. So you can see, financial, managerial, technical, and operational capacity. Those are emphasizing points you heard earlier. It does also have priority for projects capable of delivering 1 gigabit per second symmetrical service, which is, a critical threshold. And then also in areas that are unserved, and with no data caps, also something you heard before. Threshold speed consistent with the grant programs, in some cases what you heard, although we have authority to set beyond that, and labor and workforce requirements, demonstrating compliance with the federal state labor laws, certifications for compliance, and projects are subject to New York State prevailing wage requirements, require a workforce plan, and participation in those key equitable economic development programs. Really encourage you to read the New York State Wired Act, Part MMM of last year's budget. If you have any trouble tracking down this legislation, please contact our office and we'll share it with you. This just gives you a high level, some key points that are mentioned in it. Again, what I think it really does set forward is the legislature's ambition and goal, consistent with the governor's goals, that this be a wide-ranging program, addresses the full spectrum of needs that New York has, and result in not just closing broadband gaps, but also achieving equitable economic development through workforce participation, an improved broadband marketplace, and a really high-functioning, successful broadband sector. Let's move to the next slide. So just recapping some of the opportunities for ISP engagement going forward from here. So one of the key things we need, and I'm going to emphasize this point above everything, because it is critical to have your input in a variety of formats to have successful grant programs, but also a strong 5-year action plan and initial proposal. So we really need your input through the discussion today, but also through a survey that we will distribute to you after this, which asks some of the specific questions that we need to report on for our proposals and plans to NTIA. And as you saw, those are the key to unlocking the funding that drives the majority of our grant programs. We will be having additional forums on other topics, as I said, and you can reach out to us directly, but also I really encourage you to talk to county and local governments about some of the considerations, project plan size, key considerations that we touched on. So talk to local partners. That is an important consideration for us. We have been working in every region with county leaders, local government leaders, understanding their needs, and their understandings of what their communities need is critically important to us. So I encourage you to be in touch with them. And then lastly, we've been working closely with our regional digital equity coalitions, which have been critical in developing our digital equity plan. And our digital equity plan is not just framing digital inclusion grant programs, but as you saw from the principles before, it is critical to guiding all of our programs, answering questions about affordability, those other 25% of the grant criteria. What are the impacts that we're trying to achieve for these grants? So continuing to engage with those coalitions is a key consideration for you. Next, moving into the fall and winter, just to sort of, we will keep you updated. So really stay focused on the summer 2023 ones, but again, we will be running the state challenge process and beginning to open up the request for applications. I see questions about the capital projects funds. Those have not been awarded yet. We have not opened up the request for applications. Having this forum is a key input again. And so stay tuned for that, and it's good to be plugged in. You have not missed that opportunity. Next slide. And then get ready with the projects that you want to do, frankly. Get your ducks in a row, as my father used to say. Be prepared in 2024 to respond to those requests for applications, including the ones related to the BEAD program that will open after we've had our initial proposal approved. Next slide. Okay, so I just looking at some of the questions in here. Okay, so thank you for the questions in the chat. You can continue to drop questions in there. Again, you'll have the opportunity to follow up, but we want to take the last half hour of the time we have now before we send you the survey to respond to pose some particular questions to you. And I hope you take this opportunity to engage in discussion. I believe this is an unparalleled forum that we have here today, but we'll try to continue and sustain it over the months ahead. So just to start, move to the next slide, please. Having heard what you've heard today, or anything else you know in your expertise in how to implement internet service projects and grant programs, do you foresee any challenges or barriers to your organization's participation in the ConnectALL programs? This is really the highest priority for us, is maximizing participation in these programs, your participation. What are some of the challenges or barriers, if any, that you see for your participation? Use the raise hand function would be great. And if you don't, let me be clear, I'm gonna, if you don't share any barriers, I'm expecting every single one of you to participate in our grant programs. So this is your opportunity to shape these programs. So please take it. Okay.
I'm looking
Chuck,
for a
do you
raised
want
hand.
to?
Yeah, thanks. First of all, I'm on vacation in the north of Minnesota fishing, so this may break up. But one of the biggest problems we have from a corporate level investing in New York is we've got $350 million to invest in various states, but the make-ready situation is so unknown. Do you guys have any plans to take that out? Because frankly, if we do bid, we're going to have to overbid to cover the potential for very high make-ready costs. Frankly, the best way to do it is if the state had some way of addressing the make-ready, like taking on that responsibility, because then we can bid on just the cost of actually building out and not have to account for something that's a gross unknown. And also, I'll emphasize, I don't know if the corporate will, if we have the unknown of the make-ready situation in New York, I don't know if they will let me apply for more projects.
And I see Tim Johnson emphasized that as well, the unpredictable and increasing costs of make-ready. So thank you for that. That is also an area that the Public Service Commission has been looking at. And it's something that we will continue to talk to you about. I don't know, perhaps the NTIA partners would be able to speak to even the permissibility of separating out some of those costs. There certainly is a complexity in doing that, but it's something that we can continue to discuss from our perspective, because I appreciate that it poses a risk and complexity to participating in the program and estimating what the costs are for each individual project. It's a challenge for us as well. One of the things we have to do as part of our initial proposal is essentially project the extent to which we can reach all of the unserved locations, and then beyond that to underserved locations. And so that variable you describe affects us as well.
So, and just to emphasize, the situation you have right now is an uneducated applicant may well underbid a project, and then you risk them going out of business or not finishing the project. And so instead, you've got what's going to be a much higher cost to the taxpayers by people overestimating the cost because they have to cover themselves. We can't go out of business. And that ends up costing the taxpayer more.
Good point. Just see if NJ or Treasury, you wanted to add anything? Morty Gross, you asked, is there a limitation on the medium for providing service? Is it only fiber or fixed wireless as well? I will not to preempt our partners, but I think you heard them note that in each of their cases, they place a priority on fiber projects. Wendy, did you want to speak to that?
Sure. Yes, the priority is on fiber projects. If there is a fiber applicant, obviously, if there's no one providing fiber, then you look to other what we consider to be broadband, which is fixed wireless or cable hybrid fiber. So there is, your question was, is there a limitation? There's a preference for fiber. But if there's no fiber, then the state can look to other infrastructure.
For the capital projects fund funded projects or programs, there is a requirement that they meet 100 megabits per second symmetrical at project completion. There is a preference for fiber, and if there's a reason why it is impracticable to achieve that speed standard, it must be documented why that is the case, and why, and if it is impracticable, the requirement is 100 megabits per second, download 20 megabits per second, upload that is scalable to 100.
Yeah, just quickly, I noted to Troy Walcott's question, access to city assets can be a problem. So obviously, as a state, we don't control city assets, but part of our role is to advise local governments and facilitate not only our projects, but other broadband projects in the state. So we are certainly open to hearing suggestions and specific circumstances where we can provide that assistance to local governments. Let's go to Connor Hoffman, who has their hand up.
All right. The FCC, they released something that's going to require low-income housing developers to provide a broadband connection to the residents. We're working with quite a few low-income housing developers to provide this type of connection. Can this be used to fund some of the CapEx that's associated with those deployments?
If you're referring to our affordable housing connectivity program, I understood the question directly, I would say generally, yes. The focus of that program is the capital infrastructure needs to deliver high quality, affordable service to residents of affordable and public housing. The key thing that we're looking for there at this point is to have those housing providers complete our broadband in your property survey, so that we can then follow up with them to incorporate them into the program. So if you've got any questions about that, please follow up. But it sounds like, again, I think the answer to your question is yes.
Okay, yeah.
We've had some questions about.
No.
Sorry, go ahead, Connor.
Yeah, because they're not charging them. It's just included as part of rent. So I think that would apply then.
Okay. Well, yeah. we can follow up, but the ISP would be the one eligible to receive the program. But you know, we're still working on some aspects of that and would want to hear your input about how to make that program successful. There have been some questions about the MWBE requirements. We will be following up, and this will be one of the topics that we'll cover on our next forum. We'll be supporting participation in MWBE and finding the right partners there. We'll have to get back to you on whether that your Joseph Forcier, your question about conditions under which it could be waived. I'd have to follow up with you on that, and the specific percentage requirement. Frederick, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you for the second and the opportunity for the conversation. Some of the challenges that we see, by the way, I'm with Verizon. Some of the challenges that we see to participation, or some things that would facilitate participation would be allowing the providers to have flexibility in defining the service area. Subject to the 20% allowance for served locations that the NOFO allows. But that is one area where having that flexibility would allow us to define the service area based on the existing networks, based on the challenges of the specific geography. So I would just make that recommendation. Also, I would mention another thing that would facilitate participation is in terms of affordability, relying on the ACP for meeting the affordability requirement. That is something that the providers are familiar with, the consumers are familiar with. We have processes established to deal with the ACP. Again, that would facilitate participation. Just a couple of suggestions, and thank you for the opportunity.
Jody or Wendy, my understanding is the states can set the project size and be as small as an individual location and as large as all of it, I suppose. But is that possible to have it be flexible? I think the concern would be then we'd have some locations that were left out, and we have to show to you how we've essentially reached or as far as we can, or all those locations.
Right. You do need to show how you're going to reach all the unserved and unserved locations. So flexible in terms of they can be different sizes, but you can't be flexible in terms of deciding over time what that's going to look like, because you need to show in the initial proposal how you're going to reach them.
Yeah, and I think this is similar to Alex Camardo's question in the chat about how we'll make that size. So it will be, the last state grant program focused on those unserved census blocks. We'll be working from the individual address locations that are on the FCC map and creating groups of those. The other aspect of it, though, is that they will not necessarily need to be 100% unserved within the project area. It'll just have to be, I think my understanding is at least 80%. And we have to figure out how, again, we sort of balance including the underserved in that while making sure we prioritize and comprehensively reach all the unserved locations. But so there is some flexibility in terms of the service area in that regard. But correct me if I got that wrong. But I will say this is an area where we want your input, because some of you may want it to be very large projects, and some of you might want it to be smaller projects. And I'm sure all of you want it to be specifically tailored to an area that only you can serve, but you also would appreciate that A, we're trying to group everything in together, and B, we want to create opportunities for competition in some of these grant projects. Let's see. Jim, what was your concern? So first, the Buy America and Jody has said
Yeah.
that more guidance is forthcoming on that. What was your other question?
No, the other question and a concern that we have and had was the amount of resources available, both equipment and manpower. We struggled a little bit in New York projects, and now with this being national, we think we're going to struggle with it more. And I don't think it's anything that you can solve. I'm just sort of raising the point.
Okay. So again, I think Jim, what I take that as is we kind of have to think about, at least on the MWBE side, working that from all directions, make sure we boost capability and participation, and provide the supports to you all to make sure that you can engage that way.
Yeah. And is there any chance, just a quick second part of that, is there any chance that maybe the national MWBEs may be allowed to help us meet that criteria?
That's something we'll look at and get back to you. I know we want to move on. Diane, in answer to your question, I think the first answer is that this may be one of the areas where an extremely high cost threshold may come into play, because and again, Wendy and Jody, correct me if I'm wrong, but that 25% match requirement also, does that still apply to anything above that threshold, or that's where we get some flexibility?
So you get the flexibility with the match when it's deemed a high cost area, right?
High cost.
Which is determined by NTIA, or at least how you define what is high cost is going to be coming out probably at the end of this month as well. And so areas that are deemed high cost do not need to meet the 25% match. And there are different ways you can define high cost. Geography has a lot to do with it, and few households per square mile, et cetera.
Okay. All right, let's move to the next prompt, and I appreciate everybody's notes in the chat. And again, we'll certainly be following up with other discussion types. Thinking about some of those challenges or some of the other things, are there types of technical assistance that the state should be looking to provide? Because again, there are some areas where we can make some decisions, and there are other areas where Congress set it into place, and even NTIA and the Treasury Department can't make changes. So given what you heard today, what are some of the areas where you think we can be supporting you with technical assistance to succeed in navigating these programs? Okay, I just we're not planning to do a reverse auction. We will be the ones defining the project areas. And appreciate the notes about yes, the flexibility. This is exactly what we want to balance. We need to make it viable for you, but not viable, in a way that then leaves people unserved. So we're here to work with you on that. Lee, you have your hand up.
Yes, we need particular help with one telephone company that got very anti-competitive with their cost to apply for pole permits. They have like a $1,400 base fee and $160 per pole. And basically they're just rubber stamping the work the electric company did. Not really earning their keep on this stuff or any need for them to have that high cost.
Well, let's follow up and have a discussion about that. I think, I take the point that there's general concern about make ready, and then there might be specific instances where you want the state support. So we should follow up on that.
We've had
And
numerous,
yeah.
we've had numerous cases now where we wanted to install a fiber drop for 3 or 4 poles. And the cost of the pole permits, even without any consideration for make ready, far exceeded the cost of the job.
Noted, and I think that's something that it's helpful if we can get those specific numbers as we continue our conversations with our partners at the Public Service Commission.
The fiber industry is so different from the previously I was a coaxial cable provider, and it's very inexpensive to do short extensions other than the pole permits, because fiber drop wire doesn't really have any loss to it, and the short extensions can be economical other than the pole permits.
Thank you. Wade, you have your hand up.
Looking at the defined areas or the bidding potentials in our region, we are looking at pretty much staying within our territory, and that's due to, again, the make ready cost. And if I know the Public Service Commission is supposed to be taking that up, however, that will make a huge determination on if we bid outside our territory, because that's such an unknown cost.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to move. We've got a couple more prompts, so let's move to the next one. So again, these are some of the key criteria that we mentioned: eligibility requirements, application process, selection criteria, compliance requirements. Any other notes to add based on the topics that have come up today about again, where we have some authority to make determinations here? At this point, any thoughts on the challenge process?
When does NTIA expect to release its final guidelines?
I wish I had an answer for you. Soon, how's that?
But sometime before the state has to implement them, I think is always the answer. Okay, so this, I understand also if this is not an area you want to, everybody wants to jump in and speak about here, feel free to follow up with us directly to share some of your thoughts. I will say again, local collaboration, and local coordination is a key consideration for us and has been, throughout this process. Okay, so thinking about other grant programs, either past state program or federal programs, any lessons that you would like to share that we should take into consideration as we go forward with this new suite of programs?
I'm not seeing where I can raise my hand, so I'll raise my hand for whenever you're ready.
Okay, go for it.
One of the biggest problems I feel in the last 3 rounds in New York State was that it was a top-down thing, which you're actually kind of proposing now. Whereas in prior grant programs, before we went into a town to build out, we met with the town supervisor, met with the town board, we got resolutions in support of the project. And that we also actually, frankly, got some financial commitment from the local entities, the local municipalities before we build out. And that meant those projects were far more successful more quickly. One of the things that we always had them do is to waive or at least expedite any licensing and permitting requirements that were under their control. And that meant that everybody in the town essentially knew about the projects and what was going on because it wasn't coming from the top down. And I'd hate to see that lost again in this new generation. One thing you might require is, in fact, is if you're going to build out a municipality, have the municipality be on board. That, you got to make sure that there's not a self-interest in it, in the community, but a self-interest meaning that there's a tie to a local provider that would exclude external providers, but still it's better to get people involved.
And so I missed, was that Chuck?
That was Chuck.
Okay.
Oh, in the
thank
past,
you.
we always had board resolutions that supported the projects, said that they'd minimize or reduce wherever legally possible permits and expedite them, things, and that they would help advertise the project, not exclusively, meaning they could do it for other people too. But that made a big difference in terms of people knowing what we were doing and why we were there.
Okay, thank you for that input. Again, we have to be the pass-through for these the federal programs. But
Of course.
you bring up, I think, good points on potentially how to weigh the local coordination and criteria that would contribute to the success of the grant program and the projects. Let's see, I think, do we want to take some time at the end to share the survey?
Hey, Josh, it's Jim. Can I just
Yeah.
raise one more point, that something that
Sure.
was a win, or I thought that worked well in the last round of grants. Once they got rolling, the repayment process shortened down into about a 35 to a 45 day window. Towards the tail end of phase 3, it got out 60 to 90 days, sometimes longer. And it was extremely I don't know what the word is, beneficial in that 35 to 45 day window. So I just wanted to raise that point.
No, understood. That is an important point. Let's see, is that the last Q&A slide? I think it is. Okay. Can we put the link? How do we want to do the survey? It'll go out in an email. Do we want to put it in here? I'm happy to give people 5 minutes to open it now, so that you can begin your response in the time that you've already committed to this. I also want to, first of all, thank our federal partners again for all the work you're doing to bring broadband to all and the close partnership. Thank you to my team who I'm working closely with on all of this, and to continue to engage with you all and our consultant team at HRNA, who is critical to supporting these forums. So here is the survey link. You can see at the bottom, bit.ly/ConnectALL-June-ISP-forum. Please respond to it. We really need this information to have the best 5-year action plan and initial proposal, to have a comprehensive plan. And then, and this is in addition to everything you shared today. We'll follow up with questions in the chat and with an invitation to our next ISP forum. I think we have a tentative date of June 12th, but stay tuned for that. We really appreciate, we know that you all are working extremely hard to connect people in the state and keep them connected. And we appreciate your time and expertise in helping us shape these programs to make sure they'll be successful, which absolutely requires a partnership with you all, in addition to our federal partners. I think the last slide is just further emphasizing that thank you. Am I right? See, thank you. If you all have not, again, been in touch with us directly, please, share any further thoughts, questions, invitations. I think we had almost 100 people registered for this. We will be emailing out the link to the survey and the slides and recording for your reference. And, you know, as much as we can, we'd love to have further follow-up and connection with all of you. So many insights, so much experience and expertise. One of New York's strategic advantages as we implement these programs is you all. And so thank you again for your time today and your engagement in the future of these programs. And again, Wendy, Jodia, and thank you so much for your time today as well.
Thanks for having
Thanks for
us.
having us.